My name is Jason Lord. I'm the California chapter coordinator for the Zeitgeist movement. And tonight I've thrown together, I want to talk about economic inequality and the impact on our social health. I want to take a look at some health research from a few individuals whose work is respected in the fields of sociology, medicine, and behavioral science. Much of this information deals with associations between our mental and our physical health, our levels of stress, and socioeconomic status. I want to talk about how this social stratification is a significant negative impact on our well-being. Economic inequality, also known as the difference in a person's wealth or income throughout the socioeconomic pyramid. These differences of income within an economically affluent yet stratified society is going to lead us to discovering some root causes of disease and illness experienced within the population. I will use the term inequality as referring to income inequality among individuals and groups within the society, you and me. This inequality also manifests itself as unequal access to life-ground needs such as food, clean air, water, shelter, education, and nutrition. Human beings have lived in every kind of society, which include egalitarian hunting and gathering societies, on one hand, to the most brutal of dictatorships. Evidence shows that our early human ancestors, which predate the Neolithic revolution of nearly 10,000 years ago, did not live in a continuous state of conflict and scarcity. These pre-agriculture societies, though restrictive in their own ways, lived within the carrying capacities of their environments for the majority of human existence, and reflected this balance by having non-competitive and non-hierarchical social structures. Today's market-based democracies may not be in either of those ends of the spectrum, but we can learn from the difference of how stratified societies are. For example, when greater income inequality is measured, we see the social distances increase from one socioeconomic group to the next. And social stratification becomes more important to the understanding about the levels of health and well-being for everyone in the world's richest countries. As will be established over the course of this presentation, the greatest destroyer of environmental integrity, the greatest source of waste and resource depletion, and the greatest purveyor of violence, war, crime, and poverty, the greatest source of social paralysis, stopping us from moving into new methodologies or sustainable practices and progress on this planet, is not some corrupt government or some rogue corporation or some flawed human nature. It is the economic system itself. Whichever descriptor you wish to use, the free market monetary system is the most negative force in social outcomes we face today. We live in a world measured by money sequences. How well we're doing is generally measured through economic variables, such as the Dow, the stock market, and economic growth, often disregarding real levels of anxiety and stress within the society itself. And while these realities persist, the Zeitgeist movement advocates that it doesn't have to be this way, that it is possible to live in a world of equal access to health resources and experience our lives with much less stress. That'd be awesome. The circumstances in which people live and work are not just crucial for perceived well-being, but they are major influences on our health. One way you can see this is in the large differences of disease and illness between people in different social groups. Inequality reflects how hierarchical societies are. The social gradient in health is a phenomenon found throughout the industrialized world. As we look at social stratification, there's a relationship between the amount of anxiety and the rates of illness in the society throughout the entire socioeconomic pyramid. In other words, people of higher socioeconomic status, they live longer, they enjoy better health, they suffer less from disability, while those of lower socioeconomic status, they die younger. They suffer greater burden of disease and disability. This comes in the form of a social gradient, meaning that from the highest upper class down to the lowest class at the bottom, each successive step up or down this socioeconomic ladder constitutes a respective change in a person's quality of health. We will see as we move forward the relationship that greater equality has on improved social health. One of the more remarkable statistics is that greater equality shows improved innovation within a country, showing that such accomplishments are not products of competitive self-interest. I wanted to talk about a myth. A myth is that the gradient of health in industrialized societies is simply a matter of poor health for the disadvantaged and good health for everyone else. Seems plain enough. It's been that way for a long time. It is because of this myth that health policy is commonly focused on the organization and funding of health services. Further, there is a resulting concern that prevention of major chronic diseases tends to focus on trying to find a genetic predisposition for a disease. How dangerous is it that we justify swelling prison populations by assuming they must have bad genes or that's just their nature? Such views dismiss looking at the relationship between the rates of crime in the environment, which show a remarkable causality to what is considered aberrant behavior. So now, let's take a look at a current method of science that's going to change this game. Epidemiology is the study of health characteristic or health determinant patterns in a society. It is a cornerstone method of public health research by identifying risk factors for diseases and targets for preventative medicine. This field has much relevance as to how you view the information presented here. Is each example of illness or corruption an individual, isolated problem that needs legislation, laws, or resolutions? Or can you start to see how persistent problems, such as long-term increases in cancer rates, are outcomes of the system itself? This is why our analysis of the health of society has to stop being based on abstract measures, such as gross domestic product, the state of the stock market, or consumer price index, other commonly referenced economic attributes, which are used to proclaim that the society is just improving all the time. Instead, we want to use things that actually matter, that have a physical referent, such as the rates of disease, poverty, social capital and trust, life expectancy and literacy rates, prison population, drug and alcohol abuse, etc. A key factor related to what we've looked at thus far is the amount of psychological stress that is generated within our system, which is huge bearing on our health. This is important because more often we are focused on individual byproducts of income inequality, such as poor nutrition, or just education, or crime, or anxiety, as isolated, unrelated problems. So the more income inequality that exists in a society, the more stratified we become, and the more health problems that occur in both the upper and the lower classes. So this isn't about money. This is about the amount of psychological stress or psychosocial stress generated by the degree of social stratification. Whether this could be stress from just losing your job, relationship issues, lack of purchasing power for the health care that you might need, fear of being labeled a failure, or being rejected or fired. So there is a fundamental relationship between these stressors, your health, and the amount of income inequality that exists around you. In a world where we are bombarded with advertising by industries that profit off of servicing our health, people find a variety of creative ways to deal with psychological stress generated by the world around them. Annually, billions of dollars of profit are made from the continued consumption of health products and lifestyles. What I want to show you next is a brief yet incomplete list of examples of outcomes that inequality has in the so-called rich or affluent societies of the world. Thanks to the work of Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett in the UK, these relationships can now be seen. Once a country has moved past basic subsistence and works in the arena of economic affluence, the following trends occur. Mental illness, more common in more unequal countries. Life expectancy, longer in more equal countries. Drug use, more common in more unequal countries. Levels of trust, higher in more equal countries. Educational scores, higher in more equal countries. Homicide rates, higher in more unequal countries. Look at the United States, right there at the top. Rates of imprisonment, much higher in unequal countries. Infant mortality rates, higher in more unequal countries. Obesity, higher in more unequal countries. And finally, here's a summation of the outcomes we've just reviewed. This chart is a short index of outcomes that are shown to increase with inequality. So the contrast between material success and social failure in rich countries is an indicator that it's time for us to reorient our worldview. In a system where monetary gain is a priority over human well-being, we are not going to see any real significant change while this system runs its course. Rather, we will most likely suffer from increases in environmental and psychosocial stress as we fight to survive. We're at a turning point in human history where measures of well-being and happiness no longer represent a rise with economic growth and diminish, actually, with greater inequality. Or simply stated, greater equality equals increased well-being for everyone. If we want to achieve improvements in the areas of life that matter, our attention needs to shift from using abstract monetary measures and look towards ways of improving the psychological and the social well-being of people using the best information we have. These understandings are part of why the Zeitgeist movement advocates a social system that, at its core, is concerned with the health and well-being of people and holds a primary regard for environmental integrity. A resource-based economic model takes into account something that has been long lost in our financially driven world: the fundamental building blocks and the basic mechanisms required to maintain our emotional, intellectual, and physical well-being. All social systems, regardless of political philosophy, religious beliefs, or customs, ultimately depend upon natural resources. It's time we give this fundamental and profound point the attention it demands. The common basis of our survival, which the Zeitgeist movement acknowledges, is not a religion or a political philosophy or a social tradition. Our well-being is based on how intelligently we manage our use of the Earth's resources. This is the fundamental life referent, and for any social philosophy that does not heed this referent, it is simply unworkable. I thank you for your time.
Yeah.
So that concludes the information part and introduction of our evening. We're going to reset things up and we'll slide this out of the way. We'll get to our Q&A in just a minute.